Highly sensitive people. Traits, mental health, and challenges of a highly sensitive person. Written by Vayana Ariz. Narrated by Samantha Novak. Chapter 1. Comprehending High Sensitivity. The principle of high sensitivity has acquired traction in the years since Aaron envisaged it, specifically as more and more people started to self-identify as highly sensitive. In a general sense, about 15 to 20% of the population are thought to be highly sensitive. HSPs are thought to be more disrupted than others by violence, tension, or feelings of being overwhelmed. They might, subsequently, make concerted efforts to keep away from circumstances in which such things are very likely to take place. On the more positive end of the characteristic, high sensitivity is thought to be connected to higher levels of creative skill, richer personal relationships, and a greater appreciation for beauty. Am I a highly sensitive person? If you respond strongly to criticism, end up being physically and mentally overstimulated more easily than others do, and have a rich inner life, you could score highly in sensory processing sensitivity. You might also feel as if you have a higher capability for empathy and are rather sensitive to other people's moods. Children who cry easily end up being overstimulated quickly, or who are highly distressed when others are in pain might have high sensory processing sensitivity, likely because of a mix of genetic and ecological elements. While such children can present difficulties for caregivers, they are able to grow in encouraging environments. How is high sensitivity gauged? The test to measure sensory sensitivity in the adult population is referred to as the Highly Sensitive Individual Scale, or HSPS. It was first developed and validated by Erin and her husband, Art Erin, in the 1990s, and is readily available on their website. Is high sensitivity a condition? According to Erin's conception of high sensitivity, it isn't a psychological health disorder. Rather, it is specified, like other aspects of personality, as a characteristic that exists in each person to differing degrees. In spite of some disadvantages connected with high sensitivity, proof suggests it may also offer adaptive benefits. What causes a person to be highly sensitive? High sensitivity is thought to have hereditary roots, and some particular gene variations have been associated with the characteristic. But early youth environments may contribute also. Proof suggests that early experiences might have an epigenetic impact on the genes associated with sensitivity. Coping with high sensitivity. Being an extremely sensitive person can come with many obstacles. HSPs may struggle to adapt to new situations, might demonstrate apparently improper psychological responses in social circumstances, and could easily end up being awkward in response to light, sound, or certain physical sensations. Still, HSPs usually report that they form deep bonds with others, have exciting dreams and internal monologues, and find great enjoyment in art, music, and human connection. Like all personality types, there are advantages and disadvantages to being highly sensitive. With appropriate support and an acknowledgement of one's own strengths and weak points, HSPs can establish environments in which they can grow. Is there a treatment for high sensitivity? There is no particular treatment recommended for high sensitivity, as it is conceived as a personality type rather than a condition. Even so, since the trait often comes with psychological or social obstacles, and could co-occur with anxiousness and depressions, HSPs might find talk therapy beneficial for their overall wellness. How can I manage tension as an extremely sensitive person? Self-care is critical for HSPs, specifically when confronted with stressful circumstances. Getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, limiting caffeine and alcohol, and preparing for decompression time can all be useful techniques. Speaking with a friend or therapist can also help an HSP cope with increased emotional responses to tension. What's the most effective approach to deal with another person who is highly sensitive? If somebody you know is highly sensitive, it's first critical to accept that it is a part of their temperament and likely can't be changed. Giving the person space to decompress, motivating self-care, and searching for the strengths inherent in their sensitivity can help the relationship and the person prosper. What is it like to cope with high sensitivity? HSPs feel as though they register more details of their environment than less sensitive people do, including sounds, sights, or emotional hints. Although such stimuli can feel overwhelming, modifying the environment to suit their needs can be empowering. Most HSPs argue that, regardless of their sensitivity, they're still efficient in getting rid of challenges. High sensitivity, introversion, and sensory processing disorder. Though highly sensitive people have been likened to introverts or those high in neuroticism, Aaron's theory maintains that the characteristics are different from one another. Similar to introversion and neuroticism, however, in the eyes of the ones that identify with the characteristic, high sensitivity can bring many challenges. While some contrast can be drawn between Aaron's HSP theory and a condition known as sensory processing disorder, she and her collaborators don't actually believe that highly sensitive people have SPD. Likewise, high sensitivity might show up more often in the ones with autism or ADHD, but is distinct from those conditions. Is high sensitivity the exact same as introversion? High sensitivity isn't associated with introversion, but many HSPs, roughly 70% according to Aaron, identify as introverts. Introversion describes a personality type in which a person recharges by being alone. High sensitivity includes emotional, physical, and sensory sensitivity. Can you be an extroverted HSP? Yes, actually. However, high sensitivity more regularly overlaps with introversion. Aaron claims that as many as 30% of HSPs are actually extroverted, though they may still be perceived by others as shy. Chapter 2. Do highly sensitive people attract narcissists? They were kind, funny, even loving, when they wanted to be. They had big dreams and seemed to sweep you up in them. But things never, ever, ever turned out the way they wanted them, and they would explode in complicated bouts of anger, blame, or self-loathing, which naturally required you to soothe them. Sound familiar? If yes, you have probably had a narcissist in your life. Welcome to the club. Plus, sadly, for highly sensitive people, it seems to be a pretty large club. Considering that less than 1% of people are pathological narcissists, you would not think HSPs would be any more very likely to run into them than anybody else. However, what if sensitive people are particularly susceptible to a narcissist's clingy, controlling conduct? Let's explore why HSPs may be a natural target for them and what you can do against it. Narcissists are a highly sensitive person's shadow self. Those who deal with narcissistic personality disorder have an unconscious belief that they transcend to other people. With that comes a yearning for attention, respect, and usually wealth or fame, and a nearly overall absence of empathy for the needs of others. The outcome is an individual who will manipulate or use others in order to get what they want. Being an extremely sensitive individual, on the other hand, is flawlessly healthy and has nothing to do with ego. Highly sensitive people have nervous systems that process all input really deeply, from sights and sounds to ideas and feelings. They have a tendency to be creative, thoughtful, and caring. They can also get overwhelmed quickly because all that processing causes overstimulation. And these two types are practically perfect revers in one crucial way: empathy. You see, even though high sensitivity is mostly about how you process info, the reality is that most HSPs are extremely understanding. As a matter of fact, the brain regions associated with empathy are far more active in HSPs than in non-HSPs, and HSPs in general have the tendency to be giving, altruistic nurturers. That makes the narcissist, who has practically no empathy, basically the HSP's shadow self. Why do highly sensitive people attract narcissists? On the surface area, there's no reason an HSP would want to spend time with a low empathy individual. But then, narcissists don't precisely walk around holding an indication that says, "I want to use you." In fact, they do the reverse. Many narcissists learn how to act charming, friendly, and lovely in order to mask their tendencies. Most will even love bomb the people they want to get near to, building them up to feel good around the narcissist, like an addictive substance. And anybody, HSP or not, can get connected. What makes HSPs different is that their own high level of empathy means they are drawn to helping and caring for others. And the narcissist has a limitless need to be taken care of, a real need for attention, compliments, special favors, and, above all, constant reassurance. Isn't there anybody who can treat them the way they should have? Yes, sadly, and all too often it's an HSP, the person who acutely feels the pain of others and takes a real sense of satisfaction from helping. That can quickly lead to a one-sided relationship in which the narcissist gets all the benefits of an HSP's patience, empathy, caring, and love, and usually countless hours of their time. The HSP, on the other hand, gets only more and more exhausted. They could deal with a barrage of freakouts, pity parties, verbal abuse, and anger. And no matter how much they do, they will find out it's insufficient. 7 ways to secure yourself from narcissists. 1. Question inconsistent or troubling relationships. An obvious function of narcissists is that all of their relationships are struggling relationships. They will have a shaky time in relationships, passion, and any profession or school circumstance in which they really need to work cooperatively with others. This means it's a great idea to actually take a look at any relationship in your life that appears inconsistent. You could not know if someone's a narcissist, but you know if you have a battle with them every week, or if you always feel stressed after seeing them. Make it a routine to just notice these relationships, identify them for what they are, and ask yourself what you get out of them. 2. Ask your good friends for perspective. It can be hard to see through the charm of a narcissist who's buttering you up, and remarkably easy to make excuses for their outbursts or bad behavior. Nevertheless, while you could have a tough time seeing it objectively, to your friends, it's typically plain as day. Getting an outside opinion and listening to it, even if it's hard to hear, can be an excellent way to check your own instincts about an individual. 3. You should expect the worst. One helpful mental exercise, if you presume somebody is a narcissist, is to imagine the worst-case circumstance. If this person is a narcissist, they do not really believe they're doing anything wrong, and they will never, ever change. So, what if their existing behavior continues forever and ever? Would I be okay with that? Would the relationship be worth it? Framing it this way can make it much, much easier to pull back from a relationship. 4. Get away from narcissists as soon as you can. Typically speaking, the correct time to disconnect from a harmful individual is as early as possible. That's especially true with a narcissist. At the start of a relationship, there's little at stake, and it is only a little part of your life. But narcissists demand all the attention you can give them. Within months or a year, they could be the primary focus of your life, particularly if they're your partner. It's a lot easier to pull back at the start, although it is never too late. 5. Practice setting clear, firm limits. Narcissists hate limits just because the world is supposed to be about them, not anyone else. At the same time, firm boundaries allow you the space and psychological clearness to look after your own needs. The best way to set a limit is to say it clearly, directly, and as a fact, not a demand. For instance, not clear is, "I'm truly tired tonight. Is it okay if we do this at a much different time?" Clear is, "I'm not going to come by after 8 p.m. any longer, even if you're stressed out. If you really need to talk, we can establish a time on the weekend." Just be all set, because narcissists really believe that each no can end up being a yes if they push hard enough. Do not treat your boundary as something you want to argue. 6. Get some psychological distance. Narcissists can be shocking, and they will bait you to contend with them, pity them, or try to help them. All of this just pulls you in further, which can be a specifically harmful place for HSPs, because they may feel feelings more strongly than others in the first place. Just learning more about how narcissism works can help produce distance and make it much easier to resist interacting. For instance, narcissists do not actually realize what they're doing, so there's no point in arguing with them. You will never, ever win. They're incapable of seeing their own defects, so there is no other way to help them or fix them. Narcissistic personality disorder is a health problem, and it has very likely been with them since teenage years. They aren't going to change unless they get expert help. 7. Practice a very different kind of empathy. Something I find strangely reassuring is that a narcissist's conduct is motivated by, wait on it, very vulnerable self-esteem. Yeah, all that self-aggrandizing is just because they don't love themselves, and that makes them appear a lot less intimidating. It's also a way to feel compassion to them without engaging. It must be unfortunately hard to go through life never ever loving oneself, and it means that nothing will ever really bring them joy. Understanding that can soften your heart, even as you pull away. However, do pull away. It's better for you, and it might be the only sort of wake-up call that pushes the narcissist to get help. Chapter 3. Rejection Sensitivity. Feeling rejected by a good friend, member of the family, or romantic partner is a widely unpleasant experience. Some individuals, however, feel the sting of rejection a lot more acutely than others, and also have an overstated fear of being rejected by those around them. Those people are said to be high in a characteristic referred to as rejection sensitivity. Understandings of the sensitive. Somebody high in rejection sensitivity will typically interpret benign or mildly negative social hints, such as a partner not addressing a text instantly, as signs of outright rejection. They may overlook other more rational clarifications, and also peace of mind on the part of the presumed rejecter. Ironically, such conduct may actually push others away, creating a self-fulfilling prediction. Is sensitivity in my head? Sensitivity to rejection isn't just in a person's head. Evidence suggests that in people high up on this trait, feeling rejected triggers physiological changes, and that includes the fight-or-flight reaction. Brain imaging studies have also indicated that when rejection-sensitive people see disapproving facial expressions, they show increased activity in areas of the brain that impact high blood pressure, decision-making, and emotions. Can rejection sensitivity prevent my relationship? Being hypersensitive to perceived slights from your partner can derail your relationship. The person feeling declined may just inspect and second-guess every communication or interaction. That negative attitude can influence overall relationship satisfaction. Am I sensitive to rejection or just an extremely sensitive person? The highly sensitive person feels deeply about, for example, emotions and physical feelings. However, if you are a highly sensitive individual, it does not necessarily mean that you suffer from rejection sensitivity. However, the HSP does often take interactions personally and can ponder over perceived rejection with too much enthusiasm. What are the reasons for rejection sensitivity? The precise causes of rejection sensitivity are unknown, but youth experiences, like feeling turned down by a parent or primary caretaker, could increase such sensitivity later in life. Also, some proof suggests that hereditary elements may play a role. Most people high in this characteristic may also struggle with a weak sense of self-identity. What rejection-sensitive dysphoria means. Recently, some medical professionals and psychologists, especially in the ADHD community, have proposed that particularly high levels of rejection sensitivity be categorized as rejection-sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. Certain mental health conditions, including but not limited to ADHD, are connected with high emotional reactivity in general. It's thought that RSD often co-occurs with ADHD for this reason. For some grown-ups with ADHD, their rejection-sensitive dysphoria is thought to be so severe as to disrupt everyday life and the development of healthy relationships. Do I have rejection-sensitive dysphoria? If you feel extreme despondency, distress, or even failure in the face of perceived rejection, you may struggle with RSD. The feelings are so serious that you could even reach a point of panic and high anxiety. Is rejection-sensitive dysphoria in the DSM? RSD has not been acknowledged by the DSM, and the idea itself has not yet been commonly studied, nor given validated diagnostic standards. Still, it has acquired attention recently, most especially amongst adults with ADHD or borderline personality. The treatment of rejection sensitivity. Though it can be challenging to overcome high rejection sensitivity, there are certain strategies that have been shown to be beneficial. How do you treat rejection sensitivity? Therapy and/or mindfulness may help people recognize negative idea patterns that stimulate emotions of rejection. Couples treatments could also work to help break out of negative cycles brought on by one partner's high rejection sensitivity. Will dealing with co-occurring mental health conditions help? Dealing with co-occurring mental health conditions, such as ADHD or depression, may provide relief for RSD. And in many cases, simply being aware of an increased sensitivity to rejection can help a person cope more effectively. People high in rejection sensitivity feel discomfort when they actually believe, normally erroneously, that a person is rejecting them. It takes feeling regulation to manage this pain and react properly, Those attributes are also hallmarks of the borderline character disordered individual. Do neurotic people suffer more from rejection? People high in neuroticism tend to ruminate and think of their interactions over and over. They often evaluate these interactions as snubs, or perhaps a cold shoulder, then with negative self-talk see them as personal failures. Are stalkers excessively sensitive to rejection? People whose self-confidence is carefully tied to being in a romantic relationship will be especially sensitive to the separation of that relationship. If such people react inadequately to a breakup, they are more likely than others to experience intense obsessions about their partners. This situation, in some cases, causes stalking. The signs of rejection-sensitive dysphoria. While there are no empirically measurable requirements, these attributes might help find an individual who is excessively susceptible to being dissed. High sensitivity about the possibility of rejection. Overly high standards for oneself. Feeling easily activated towards guilt or shame. Isolating oneself in a preemptive strike not to be turned down. Aggressive or rageful behavior towards the ones who have been perceived to have slighted the individual. Regularly feeling an uncomfortable physical reaction due to not fitting in or being misconstrued. Self-confidence that is entirely dependent on what others think and fluctuates accordingly. And frequent and intense ruminating after an interaction. Chapter 4. Typical traits of highly sensitive people. Research studies estimate that 15 to 20% of the population is highly sensitive. However, lots of people do not know what this means. While it's related to introversion, being a highly sensitive person isn't the exact same thing. Highly sensitive people are hypersensitive to a range of stimuli, varying from pain to caffeine intake. As a result, highly sensitive people show several specific, discernible behaviors. Adapted from Aaron and Aaron's highly sensitive individual scale, here are 9 things highly sensitive people do. 1. They become overwhelmed when they have a lot to do. Highly sensitive people struggle to remain on a job when they have several different things to do. They become observably anxious, and as their tension levels boost, they have more difficulty being productive. 2. They find loud environments disorderly. Highly sensitive people don't work well in open offices simply because their senses are put into overdrive by the sights, sounds, smells, and activity buzzing around them. 3. They get hangry. When highly sensitive people are starving, they grow angry. They struggle to operate and usually take out their disappointments on those closest to them. 4. They choke when they're under observation. Highly sensitive people perform at their peak when they're impersonal. Put them in a high-stakes circumstance, such as a discussion in front of their boss, and they're likely to perform improperly as a result of the pressure. 5. They're deeply moved by the arts. Whether it is attending a musical or checking out an art gallery, highly sensitive people appreciate the arts. They find that expressions of creative skill stir up their feelings. 6. They recognize other individuals' discomfort. Highly sensitive people recognize it when another person needs the lights dimmed or the music lowered. They quickly sense when others are feeling overwhelmed. 7. They pull away when things end up being too overwhelming. After a long day or a busy week, an extremely sensitive individual needs silent time to recharge. A dark bedroom, for instance, can supply the best space to recover. 8. They grow awkward when there are loud sounds. Loud rock performances and noisy fireworks shows generally aren't much fun for highly sensitive people. They have a lower limit for sound compared to the rest of the population. 9. They stay away from violent media. Watching violent films or playing graphic video games can be too much for highly sensitive people. So do not be amazed if, for example, they opt out of watching horror movies with you. The advantages and disadvantages of being highly sensitive. While many people warn against the risks of being a highly sensitive person, like an increased risk of depression and anxiety, being sensitive isn't all bad. Highly sensitive people are more conscientious. They see certain specifics others may overlook, and they can be extremely creative. Being a highly sensitive individual doesn't mean you have a condition that needs to be repaired. It just means that you process sensory information more deeply. Recognizing that you're a highly sensitive individual could help you develop a better awareness of yourself and your needs. Chapter 5. Mental Tricks to Help You Stop Worrying. Stress comes from a desire to be in control. We usually want to control our environment or the outcome of each situation. But the more you try to control everything around you, the more restless you will feel. It's a vicious circle to break. Concern or worry, try to get control, fail, worry again, repeat. Fretting about things you cannot control, like the state of the economy or another person's conduct, will drain you of the psychological strength you really need to be your best. It can also cause other hazardous habits, like blaming yourself way too much or micromanaging others. Thankfully, you don't need to resign yourself to being a long-lasting worrywart. You can take control of your mind and train your brain to think in a different way. Here are 2 things you can do the next time you catch yourself fretting about things you can't control. 1. Develop a realistic sense of control. Determine what's within your control and what isn't. Here's an example. You can control how attractive your marketing ads are, but you can't control whether people purchase your item. In addition, you can give your employees the tools they need to prosper, but you cannot push them to be productive. When you strike a healthy balance of control, you'll see that you can choose your own attitude and conduct, but you can't control many external factors. So, when you're confronted with an issue or experiencing pain, ask yourself, is this an issue I can resolve? Or do I need to change how I feel about the issue? If it's within your control, take on the problem. If it's out of your control, concentrate on changing your emotion. Just use healthy coping skills, like engaging in a hobby or practicing meditation, to handle the awkward feelings that get stimulated when things are just out of your control. 2. Arrange time to stress. The majority of the people who enter into my treatment office trying to find a solution on how to stop stressing want it quick and simple. But there is not a magic technique or special pill that will make you stop worrying right now. There is a psychological trick, however, that can help you with your fretting. The technique involves scheduling time to worry. It sounds absurd on the surface. However, it actually works. And there are research studies to back it up. Reserve 15 minutes each day to worry. Mark it on your calendar or add it to your schedule. Make it consistent if you can. Think something like, I'll worry from 7 to 7:15 p.m. each night. You may not want to worry right before bedtime, though. That may keep you up. Whenever you catch yourself worrying beyond your time span, Remind yourself it's not time to worry, and that you will have lots of time to think of those concerns throughout your scheduled time. Once you reach your concern time, then stress all you want. Sit and think about all those worries that are outside of your control. You can even write them down if you choose. Then, after 15 minutes have passed, tell yourself it's time to get back to your everyday life. Get up and go about your typical business. With constant practice, research shows that you will deduce your worries to just 15 minutes a day. That's a huge enhancement if you are used to fretting 24/7. Build your mental muscle. Becoming mentally more powerful requires you to have a well-balanced sense of control. After all, you can do a lot to increase your joy and your chances of success, but you can't control each aspect around you, like the weather, the economy, or how other individuals behave. When you stop fretting about things you can't control, you will have more time and energy to commit to the things you do have control over. And this can be key to reaching your greatest potential. Chapter 6. Do highly sensitive people have autism? If you're an extremely sensitive person, or HSP, you might already know that high sensitivity is often compared to autism. That can be unexpected. The signs of the two qualities are really different. However, both have been treated extremely likewise by the general public. Just as autism is now significantly seen as a healthy characteristic, being an HSP isn't a condition, but a trait found in up to 20% of the population. Both also include a ton of benefits. When it pertains to high sensitivity, that includes empathy, compassion, creativeness, and the instinctual ability to see connections that others miss out on. The similarities go deeper than that, however. Here is an example. Both autism and being an HSP can involve severe sensitivity to your environment. Any highly sensitive individual comprehends what it's like to have the world showed up too loud, and many autistic individuals have that exact same experience, particularly about relatively little stimuli, like the rub of clothing texture or an intrusive noise. Also, both HSPs and people with autism tend to get overwhelmed by ecological stimuli. Autistic kids, for example, could stress, have a tantrum, or close down in response to overwhelming stimuli. And many HSP kids will do the same thing when they get overstimulated, particularly if their parents or caretakers have not taught them good techniques to keep away from overwhelm. But despite those similarities, autism and high sensitivity are two different things. Not only that, but a recent study reveals they're profoundly different, and that high sensitivity is also unassociated to numerous disorders, like schizophrenia and PTSD. It implies that being an extremely sensitive individual is a typical, healthy quality. Here's what the research study found, and what it means for highly sensitive people. What makes autism different from high sensitivity? The research study, led by Dr. Bianca Acevedo of the Neuroscience Research Study Institute of the University of California, is an extensive analysis of 27 papers comparing high sensitivity, autism, and other conditions. It describes high sensitivity by its formal name, sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS. The research study also refers to autism as autism spectrum disorder and uses some language that I think many autistic people would disagree with. I'll just say in advance that many people reason that autism is highly beneficial and should not be classified as a condition at all. A fair amount of research concurs, including proof that autism might associate with high intelligence. Acevedo and her team found 3 major differences between SPS and autism. 1. Autism includes social deficits. High sensitivity does not. Acevedo's research noted that autism comes together with so-called social deficits, like trouble making eye contact, acknowledging faces, reacting to others' emotional hints, and reciprocating another individual's intentions. Think of smiling back at a person who smiles at you. For autistic individuals, the social deficits are clear as early as 2 or 3 months of age, and they're directly tied to how an autistic individual's brain works. They tend to show less response in brain areas related to empathy, social hints, and self-reflection. One reason for this might be that autistic people have extremely different nonverbal communication than neurotypical people, and they do not get to mirror individuals with their own nonverbal communication as much as neurotypical kids. To put it simply, this so-called deficit might be a lot more of a lack of opportunity than an innate part of autism. For SPS, or high sensitivity, exactly the opposite is true. Highly sensitive people do not show social deficits. In fact, they have the tendency to be highly responsive to social cues, facial expressions, and the intentions of others. Likewise, the exact same parts of the brain that are less responsive among autistic people tend to be extremely active for HSPs, who present high levels of empathy, social awareness, and self-reflection. 2. For highly sensitive people, social situations are extra fulfilling. People in general are wired to find social interactions rewarding. That motivates us to form strong bonds, help one another out, and comply with one another. It's always been a key to our survival. Highly sensitive people are no exception and could even react more strongly to social interactions than others do, feeling anything from soothed to downright jubilant about a positive interaction. Individuals with autism, though, experience social interactions differently. For them, Acevedo's study says, there simply is not as much of a sense of benefit, peace, or emotion involved in interacting socially. An exchange with another person could get their attention, but not always feel significant. The research study says this more impacts their capability to respond properly to others. Interpretation matters a lot here. To be clear, autistic people can and do form deep, meaningful relationships, like anybody else. The difference is in how fulfilling they find social interaction in its own right. Whereas it's extra rewarding for HSPs, it is less naturally rewarding for autistic people. 3. Their brains handle stimuli in considerably different ways. Consider that both HSPs and autistic individuals can be incredibly susceptible to stimuli. It's not a surprise that they do share some areas of high brain activity in common, specifically parts connected to attention and reacting, physically or mentally, to stimuli. But that's about where the resemblances in brain activity end. The highly sensitive brain, for instance, shows higher than typical levels of activity in areas connected to calmness, hormone balance, self-discipline, and even self-reflective thinking, the capability to process one's own actions and feelings, and come to much deeper conclusions about them. These go together with a greater level of empathy and depth of processing that define high sensitivity. All of these are either positive, helpful characteristics, or can be good or bad, depending on the situation. And all of them contrast starkly with the autistic brain, which Acevedo found to be less active when it comes to the brain areas associated with peace, emotion, and sociability. High sensitivity is incorrectly compared to a range of disorders. High sensitivity is also in some cases compared, mistakenly, to different psychological health conditions. The big ones are schizophrenia and trauma, PTSD. Those two conditions have little in common on the surface, with one another or with being an HSP, but all of them can include increased sensitivity to sensory stimuli. Acevedo and her coworkers delved into these disorders too, and it turns out that none of them are connected to high sensitivity. For starters, schizophrenia has even less in common with high sensitivity than autism does. Like autism, it comes with none of the increased empathy or self-reflection that HSPs exhibit. And unlike autism, it has almost nothing in common with high sensitivity when it comes to brain activity. Also, though not discussed in the research study, unmanaged schizophrenia almost undoubtedly triggers significant issues in an individual's life and relationships. High sensitivity does not. PTSD is a bit more difficult because highly sensitive people might be at a higher risk of developing PTSD if they go through some sort of trauma. But PTSD patients show none of the boosted activity in parts connected to calmness, self-discipline, or social consciousness that highly sensitive people show, and they suffer a variety of symptoms that HSPs without trauma do not. Disturbances in a PTSD victim's brain, for example, tend to influence their memory and their ability to incorporate new information. Those abilities, and the capacity to process information in general, are actually strong points for a highly sensitive person. High sensitivity could be an evolutionary advantage. It makes a lot of sense why researchers would try to find a connection between these different characteristics and disorders. After all, if they all include some kind of increased sensitivity, it's worth checking whether they work the same way in the brain, particularly if that could help people. What's fascinating about this research, though, isn't just that it showed that these things have almost absolutely nothing in common with being an extremely sensitive person. Frankly, if you know any HSPs, you probably could have seen that one coming. No, what is fascinating is what else this research study suggests. It doesn't just say that being an HSP is healthy or typical. Rather, at each step, it practically trips over the fact that high sensitivity is highly helpful. Being an HSP includes increased brain activity in helpful brain regions, a strong association with desirable personality traits, and even a propensity towards positive, helpful, pro-social behavior. I think the research study's own conclusion says it best. We suggest that adaptive SPS methods, including empathy, awareness, peace, and physiological and cognitive self-control, could serve a species by helping with deep incorporation and memory for environmental and social information, which could ultimately foster survival, well-being, and cooperation. In other words, your high sensitivity could be an evolutionary advantage, one that helps our entire species. Chapter 7: Genes and Hypersensitivity. Do you ever find yourself annoyed by small noises or distractions that others don't appear to notice? Do you quickly pick up on what a person is feeling or what their intents are, even if they haven't expressed them out loud? Do you get completely overwhelmed by a stressful environment or the sheer number of people whose needs you see? And do you often really need to go someplace quiet and alone to recover? If so, you may have been told all your life that you're too sensitive and need to get tougher. But you might not know that this is a normal, healthy characteristic, and it includes a distinct evolutionary benefit. If the experiences above specify you to a T, there's a good chance that you are a highly sensitive individual, HSP. And if so, recent research suggests that there's a very good reason you sometimes feel overloaded. Although high sensitivity is hereditary, there is not just a single gene that triggers it. As a matter of fact, scientists have significantly found that personality types are based upon a whole collection of genes, not just one or two. That's true of traits as different as introversion and intelligence. With high sensitivity, there are at least 3 separate sets of genes that might play a role, and different highly sensitive people may have some or all of them. Remarkably, every single one of these genes influences your brain or nervous system. Below, we'll look at each of the 3 sets of genes. However, remember, your genes alone are only part of who you are, and each HSP has grown up with different experiences. Your mileage may differ. 1. The sensitive gene, serotonin transporter. Serotonin is a chemical in the body that does, well, a lot of things. But one of the most important, it supports your state of mind. Serotonin transporter, on the other hand, is a chemical that helps move serotonin out of the brain. So it's the on-off switch for all that mood-balancing serotonin. And guess what? Highly sensitive people have a special variation of the serotonin transporter gene that behaves a little in a different way. If you have this gene variation, you have lower serotonin levels, and chances are good you'll be a highly sensitive individual. The gene is formally called 5-HTT-LPR, so I'm going to stick with the sensitive gene. This gene variation was originally believed to cause depression, but that's not exactly right. As a matter of fact, it does not cause any state of mind disorder at all on its own, but it does make you sensitive to your environments, and more likely to learn lessons from them. That matters a lot in childhood development. If you combine this gene with an unhealthy youth environment, research finds you have a greater risk of depression and other conditions throughout life. Yet, integrate it with a safe, supportive environment, and you get better than normal results as an adult. Essentially, it may enhance the impacts of both good and bad childhoods. So, what does this mean if you're a highly sensitive person? Well, you should know that your childhood experiences will have an outsized impact on your well-being as an adult. That does not mean you can't resolve and get past the impacts of a rough childhood, but it does mean it could impact you more than it may influence others. 2. The dopamine genes. While the first gene matters, it's not the only one. Researchers have also found a connection between sensitivity and a set of 10 different gene variations related to dopamine. Dopamine is the brain's benefit chemical. Strictly speaking, we don't yet know how these dopamine genes connect to sensitivity, but we have some hints. For starters, it makes sense that somebody with a sensitive system would really need to feel less rewarded by external stimuli. Otherwise, you'd be constantly drawn to the same loud, busy environments that exhaust you. And the proof bears that out. The gene versions with the biggest impact on sensitivity all have to do with dopamine receptors, which affect how sensitive you are to dopamine in the first place. It would also make sense for sensitive people to feel more rewarded by positive, social, or psychological cues, which they're more tuned into than others in the first place. As a highly sensitive person, have you ever been baffled why your good friends want to go someplace loud and insane? Or why they'd enjoy a busy, aggressive game? If so, perhaps it's because you do not get the exact same dopamine hit from these loud external stimuli. And that may be some or all of these gene versions at work. 3. The emotional intensity gene. Everyone tends to experience life more strongly during emotionally charged moments. However, this emotional vividness is stronger for some people than it is for others. And it's no surprise that high sensitivity has been linked to the gene version that controls it. This gene, which I'll call the psychological intensity gene, belongs to norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter that also aids with the body's stress response. And there's one variant, which could be common in HSPs. that turns up the dial on psychological vividness. If you have it, you may view the psychological aspects of the world more vividly. You could also have more activity in the parts of the brain that produce internal, emotional responses to your experiences. Most highly sensitive people are keenly mindful that they have stronger emotional responses than the individuals around them, and usually see psychological undercurrents where others pick up nothing. If you're highly sensitive, this isn't your creativity. You may actually have a brighter scheme of emotional colors, so to speak, simply because of this gene variation. And it directly drives the level of empathy and awareness you have for other people's emotions. An evolutionary benefit. Only about 15 to 20% of the population is actually believed to be highly sensitive. That's uncommon enough that HSPs feel different growing up and are typically still misconstrued as adults, but it is a large number of people. And high sensitivity isn't limited to people either. The same trait has been found in at least 100 other species. Biologists believe there is a really good reason for that. Being highly sensitive can be an evolutionary advantage. Truth be told, sensitive people and animals are able to pick up on more environmental hints, recognize things that others do not, and make wise choices in apparently new or uncommon circumstances. In many cases, that's a much smarter technique than just using a set of regimens or charging ahead at random, both methods that less sensitive animals and people tend to use. This has even been tested out a lot in computer simulations. The simulations have showed that individuals who made the effort to notice all of the environmental hints before making a decision typically came out ahead, even with a high cost to doing so. In the real world, we call that cost overstimulation. Their sensitivity allowed them to make better and better choices in time. But there was a catch. Being sensitive was only a benefit if it was in the minority. If everyone is sensitive, we all see the same specifics, and it no longer gives anybody a special advantage. That is probably why HSPs are relatively rare at about 20% of the population and not, say, 80%. So, if you have ever found yourself just wondering why no one else in your office stops to think things through the way you do, it may actually be a good thing. You have the capability to see things others do not, and that makes you specifically important. This has been Highly Sensitive People: Traits, Mental Health, and Challenges of a Highly Sensitive Person. Written by Vaiana Ariz. Narrated by Samantha Novak. Copyright year 2020 by Vaiana Ariz. Production copyright by Vaiana Ariz. Highly Sensitive People: Survival Guide for Introverts and Empaths. Written by Vaiana Ariz. Narrated by Samantha Novak. Chapter 1: Introversion, Extroversion, and the Highly Sensitive Person. According to the documentary Sensitive: The Untold Story, there are 1.4 billion highly sensitive people, HSPs, in the world, 15 to 20% of the population. As Elaine Aron's research has revealed, 30% of that 15 to 20% of the HSP population are sensitive extroverts, or around 420 million HSPs. Sadly, due in most part to social networks and current books released on introversion, these 420 million sensitive extroverts are usually mislabeled or lumped into a general classification of extroversion. They are often described as the extroverted introvert, the outgoing introvert, or the reflective extrovert. It is essential to separate between the introverts and extroverts who are HSP and the ones who don't self-identify as HSPs. All HSPs, whether introvert or extrovert, have 4 primary qualities, as identified by research psychologist Dr. Elaine Aron in Psychotherapy and the Highly Sensitive Individual, 2010. These 4 are DOES. 1. Depth of processing. 2. Overstimulation. 3. Emotional responsiveness and empathy. 4. Sensitive to subtleties. The other 80% of the population who aren't highly sensitive don't have these 4 attributes, nor the implications connected with them. It is easy to see why the lines between introversion, extroversion, and high sensitivity have gotten blurred. I actually believe this confusion first began when 2 extremely handy books on introversion were released: The Introvert Advantage, Laney, 2002, and Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Won't Stop Talking. Both of these books have been especially advantageous not only to introverts, but also to highly sensitive people as well. The Introvert Advantage has done an outstanding job of bridging a space between introverts and extroverts. I particularly liked her book because Laney advocates for those that have often felt overlooked, unseen, or like something was wrong with them. These sentiments are almost identical to the ones shared by the highly sensitive people I have had the honor of working with since 2000. Susan Cain's well-written, researched book, Silent, includes 7 to 10 pages, defining Elaine Aron's research. Perhaps it is here that the descriptions between sensory processing sensitivity and introversion start to merge. Any hoped-for discussion about correlations or overlaps between the two are unfortunately omitted. Cain does attempt to clarify or prevent possible confusion by sharing that she intentionally chose a wider definition of introversion, making use of the work of many, and that includes Jerome Kagan and Elaine Aron. Page 269, Quiet. Susan Cain attended the 10th HSP Collecting Retreat at Walker Creek Ranch in Marin County in 2006. And I was happy to read a detailed account of her retreat experience in Quiet, page 133 to 134. It was at this retreat that Susan shared her interest in the connection between introversion and sensitivity. Later, I was honored to be spoken with for her book, in addition to Dr. Aron. Nonetheless, when her book was published, I found myself confused and a bit dismayed when reading the description of introversion. I was confused mainly because my non-HSP introvert spouse was nowhere to be found in Quiet, yet I saw myself, the sensitive extrovert, throughout. I soon realized Dr. Aron shared a similar reaction of dismay. Someone stated, "Her discussion of introversion throughout her book is almost similar to what has become the basic meaning of high sensitivity. Deep thinkers, choosing to process slowly, susceptible to stimuli, emotionally reactive, needing time alone, etc., all as described in the first scientific paper particularly on sensitivity, released in 1997. The confusion is simple to understand, given Cain's broad definition of an introvert. A person of reflection, one who is reflective, cerebral, bookish, unassuming, sensitive, thoughtful, serious, reflective, subtle, inner-directed, mild, calm, modest, solitude-seeking, shy, risk-averse, and thin-skinned. Here is Cain's definition of the extrovert, defined in Quiet. A person of action, someone that is ebullient, expansive, sociable, gregarious, excitable, dominant, assertive, active, risk-taking, thick-skinned, outer-directed, lighthearted, strong and comfortable in the spotlight. More confusion. There are a lot more conflicting definitions of introversion and extroversion, and these are plentiful in many social network sites on introversion as well. The Myers-Briggs personality evaluation, and others like it, add to the confusion as they rightly verify. Extroverts get their energy restored by hanging around with people, involved in a wide range of events or social activities, and that introverts get their energy renewed by spending time alone, taking some time to inwardly process and think about ideas, and to participate in quieter, more thoughtful activities. But we do need to ask, what about the sensitive extrovert? We also stop briefly to check, reflect, have deep, complex inner lives, introspective, thrive when connecting deeply with others, and really need additional downtime to process the events of our day, inner-directed. We also really need more sleep than others, and we really need privacy or downtime to recuperate from overstimulation. See how easy it is to confuse the characteristics of highly sensitive people with a broader meaning of introversion? It is this confusion that inspired my research with the sensitive extrovert, which incorporated the following: more than 100 written survey responses over 10 years, 37 in-depth semi-structured interviews with sensitive extroverts between the ages of 35 and 70, and my own ethnographic observations over 16 years gotten from observing HSPs at 33 HSP gathering retreats. That research was improved by 20 years as a certified professional counselor, 17 of those working specifically with HSPs. My work has also included administering and interpreting the Myers-Briggs personality evaluation to a wide variety of individuals since becoming certified to utilize this tool in 1991. Although I'm a great fan of the Myers-Briggs, having been certified in its use since 1991, it is necessary, specifically in the framework of this work, to note it was conceptualized long before the research into our quality of SPS sensory processing sensitivity. This space in knowledge inspired the creation of my class, Myers-Briggs with the HSP overlay. This class helps, along with many other insights, helps to separate HSP introversion and HSP extroversion from the general categories of introversion and extroversion. Understanding the highly sensitive extrovert, truths and misunderstandings. Chapter 2. The Criteria. The highly sensitive extrovert, HSE, meets most, if not all, of the criteria Kane uses to define the introvert in quiet. We are reflective, introspective, kind, gentle, compassionate, creative, visionary, intense, and observant. Lots of us are social justice activists, teachers, humanitarians, poets, spiritual instructors or therapists, and choose a less stimulating environment over a more random social one. The HSE does need to go inward. It is in these quieter environments where we pull away for the deep, internal processing that comes naturally to being an HSP. This inward state is also where our spiritual life resides and where we rest and recharge from an often harried external world. The HSE also needs to gain energy from the external world, simply because if we spend too much time in this inner world, we can become lethargic, uneasy, uninspired, or even slightly depressed. It's then we know we need to get out of our inner world and look for novel stimulus which will inspire or energize us. Notice the word novel. Our trips in the external world need to be novel and chosen by us, based on our individual needs. Otherwise, the activity can become just as overstimulating for us as the introvert HSP. And even when we are out, very much enjoying ourselves, we can often return home overstimulated, physically tired, and in need of extra sleep or processing time. The HSE is not the same as the ambivert. Why is this the case? Simply because ambiversion indicates one can choose to go out, take part in social activities, and enjoy themselves without the sort of overstimulation, deep processing, or awareness of subtleties that HSPs encounter. Ambiversion also does not take into consideration the other attributes in the DOES acronym mentioned above. When in more positive environments, as separately described by the HSC, we can be highly responsive and our natural happiness, curiosity, and excitement might be considered as normally extroverted. Our highly sensitive enthusiasm can be contagious. Yet, if we are not careful, we can end up being easily overstimulated and could overstimulate others too. In more negative environments, the HSE can appear reclusive. We can also end up being silent, reserved, or withdrawn. An additional clarification of this can be found in the differential susceptibility work of Belsky and Plus. Unlike the introvert, the HSE eagerly anticipates creating significant time out in the world, and are typically drivers for others to participate in our special experiences. Yet we can be weary and depleted of energy, being the only one to start activities with our more reclusive buddies. Due to our propensity towards overstimulation, it is not uncommon for the HSE to leave an occasion early. Even when delighting in an activity, we can typically return back home feeling wired and tired, just because the very selected activity that energized us can also make us exhausted and in need of alone time or a nap. The HSE can usually be found participating in intriguing, novella, creative activities outside the home, and we typically enjoy these activities more with one or two others. When out and about in their chosen activities, they are warm and interesting, often enjoying or initiating conversations with complete strangers they meet, and or in some cases, making a new good friend. Some research, Laney 2002, suggests the neurotransmitter dopamine stimulates the extrovert brain, causing them to look for external rewards in the form of status, money, sex, social affiliation, or a promotion at work. It is essential to know the HSP, introvert or extrovert, isn't motivated by these external social rewards. Truth be told, it's more like the opposite is really true. The highly sensitive individual, extrovert or introvert, reflects more about the way the world is going, is more concerned with deep, meaningful relationships, and the expedition of the meaning of life, social injustices, and why things are the way they are. Truth be told, Barry Yeager's book, Making Work for the Highly Sensitive Person, makes it clear that the HSP is more in need of psychic income and will usually take a position lower in income if the job offers a chance for significant engagement in the world. HSEs differ according to their age. The more youthful HSE is likely to be quite social, never declining an invitation to do something with their good friends. This could be simply because they possess more physical energy, which enables them to enjoy more extroverted activities. The more mature or older HSE isn't rewarded by social activities, nor by communicating with friends or strangers, unless it is an environment and interaction based on trust, openness, and authenticity. Our passions manifest outwardly, and we will quickly risk our comfort zone for causes that are important to us. Many HSEs are social justice activists, speaking up passionately for what our company believes. A lot of us are leaders, not just because we want to be, and not because we enjoy the spotlight, we don't, but because our compassionate convictions have put us in management roles, typically because no one else has stepped up to the plate. You'll find many HSEs enthusiastic and expressive about what they do to make the world a better place, particularly when reciprocity and mutuality are in place. Unlike the HSP introvert, we go inward. That is, we introvert as a verb, generally to recover, rest, and renew, not necessarily simply because we choose to be alone. After our physical and psychological energies are charged by being in, we go out to manifest our visions, our passions, or our work in the world. We enjoy sharing our ideas with other like-minded individuals. The HSE extrovert is warm, engaging, meaningful, and simple to know, and can make and keep friends without way too much trouble, though they're usually easily satisfied with only a small circle of close, loyal, and true relationships. It is always simple to recognize the sensitive extrovert who attends an HSP gathering retreat. I never ever have to wonder if they're enjoying themselves, for their smiles, openness, and conversations leave no question that they are very happy they came. Introverts are harder to read, at the very least for the first 2 days. After this, the introvert HSP appears just as engaged as the sensitive extrovert. The HSE can usually unconsciously challenge the status quo by just mentioning something they're passionate about in an offhanded way. This then draws attention to themselves, which is something we find extremely uncomfortable. Therefore, we withdraw and can look like introverts. Having said that, if our values are in jeopardy, we can be passionate, outspoken, and will endure overstimulation and attention so as to make our perspective understood or to challenge an oppression. Many HSEs are probably high experience seekers, HSS, although not always in a physically tough sort of way. We are seekers of novelty and do not avoid intense experiences if chosen by us. The same could be said for introverts who are high-feeling seeking. For the HSE, HSS, being understimulated can be just as anxiety-producing as being overstimulated. Therefore, finding somebody's ideal level of stimulation is usually hard, yet satisfying, energizing, and nurturing when comprehended, experienced, and preserved. Many HSEs find great satisfaction in jobs that allow them to teach a subject matter they enjoy. An example would be the following. One sensitive extrovert loved being a successful coach of a ladies' volleyball team, yet she feared recognition night when she had to use a microphone to bestow awards and to speak to a crowd of parents. Other sensitive extroverts, when permitted to manage their own time, have found parenting to be a great happiness. Others found teaching to be very rewarding, yet were drained by public school environments. The HSE grows on deep, meaningful connections with others. We typically work best when collaborating with others, especially when feeling safe to share our truest thoughts and emotions. We are very creative, visionary, and influenced by typical interests we share with others. We thrive on mutuality, reciprocity, and empathy, and can wither without it. Just like the HSP introvert, feeling misinterpreted, omitted, or revoked is a recurring theme for the sensitive extrovert, too. The HST determined as feeling things deeply, being emotional, caring deeply about others and the world at large. So, are there any differences between the HSP extrovert and the HSP introvert? Yes, there are. Though my research plainly shows the difference between the sensitive extrovert and sensitive introvert to be rather little. The greater distinction was between the HSP population and the other 80% who don't self-identify with the sensory processing sensitivity characteristic. Though, here are a few differences between the sensitive extrovert and sensitive introvert. We do choose to share our thoughts and feelings aloud instead of write them. Actually, when confused or seeking clearness, we may initially jot down a few notes, but are most relieved and acquire the most clarity when talking with a reliable, good friend. We do not like to share our personal lives or habits by means of social media, though we do easily share our personal lives face-to-face with those we know, like, and trust. Unlike what social media tells us about the introvert, The HSE does not mind talking on the phone. Actually, the phone has nothing to do with it. It is the individual we are speaking with and the setting of the discussion that means the most to us. So yes, we will let the call go to voicemail if we don't recognize the caller. That being said, if it is a call from a person in our inner HSP circle, or somebody we know and trust, we joyfully get their call and are more than likely enriched or stimulated by the setting of our conversation. Neither the HSE nor HSP introvert is enjoying small talk. Yet, observations made about 2 days into the 4-day HSP collecting retreats show that after the chance to go deep and share our genuine selves, the HSP can and does take part in small talk, often much to their surprise. Chapter 3. The distinctions between highly sensitive people and empaths. As a psychiatrist and an empath, I typically get asked, what is the distinction between empaths and highly sensitive people? The following are the resemblances and parts of overlap. I also dedicate an area of the Empath Survival Guide to this important difference. Empaths share all of the qualities of what Elaine Aron, PhD, has called highly sensitive people, or HSPs. Those include a low threshold for stimulation, the need for alone time, sensitivity to light, sound, and odor, and a hostility to large groups. It also takes highly sensitive people longer to wind down after a busy day, since their capability to transition from high stimulation to being silent is slower. Highly sensitive people are usually introverts, while empaths can be introverts or extroverts, although most are introverts. Empaths share a highly sensitive individual's love of nature and quiet environments, their desire to help others, and their rich inner life. Even so, empaths take the experience of the highly sensitive individual much further. We can notice subtle energy called Shakti or prana in Eastern customs, and actually absorb it from other people and different environments into our own bodies. Highly sensitive people don't normally do that. This capacity enables us to experience the energy around us, and that includes emotional and physical feelings in incredibly deep ways. And so, we actively internalize the feelings and pain of others, and usually have some trouble differentiating someone else's discomfort from our own. In addition, some empaths have profound spiritual and instinctual experiences with animals and nature, which aren't normally related to highly sensitive people. Being a highly sensitive person and an empath aren't equally exclusive. One can be both, and many highly sensitive people are also empaths. If you think about this distinction in terms of a compassionate spectrum, empaths are on the far end. Highly sensitive people are a little more in. Those with strong empathy who are not HSPs or empaths are in the middle. And narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths who have empath-deficient conditions are at the far opposite end. Chapter 4. What highly sensitive people need to be happy. This is the story of someone who is highly sensitive. Growing up, I was a very sensitive kid. One of my earliest memories is of going crazy after seeing an especially bad story on the news. I don't remember what the story was about, but I do remember running into my bedroom, plugging my ears, and making up a tune about how every little thing will be all right. I sang it as loudly as I could to cover up the sound of the television until my mom came in, shocked to find me in such a ramped-up state. It wasn't till much later that I learned that I am an extremely sensitive person, HSP, and then things finally made sense. Highly sensitive people process info deeply and, subsequently, experience the world a little differently than others. Images of violence or stories of heartbreak can be agonizing to them. Sudden loud sounds, bright lights, and busy schedules have the power to rattle HSPs profoundly. Today, I am a writer who studies introversion and high sensitivity. I found out that HSPs really need somewhat different things in life to be happy than non-HSPs. Here are 14 of those things. Remember that every highly sensitive individual is an individual, so each will need partially different things to thrive. 1. A slower, simpler rate of life. Just because they process info deeply, HSPs may move a little slower than others. They could really need more time to do certain jobs, like leaving the home in the morning. They could take a little bit longer to make decisions, like what product to buy at the grocery store, because they're taking in not just the mountain of choices, but also nourishment information, price, and how they feel about chicken noodle soup. Suddenly, their mind flashes to chickens being caged in small cages, then butchered. And they should take several beats to contemplate if they can live with this reality on their supper plate. All of this takes some time. 2. Time to unwind after a hectic day. Like introverts, HSPs cannot go for too long. Their extra-sensitive nerve systems take in mounds of info and process it to the umpteenth degree. As a result, they may get quickly overwhelmed and worn out after a busy day. Time to relax lowers their stimulation level and restores their peace of mind. 3. A calm, quiet space to retreat to. Ideally, this is paired with number 2. This space, preferably, would have low lighting, little sound, a stunning visual, and the HSP's preferred tools to unwind: a book, music, a comfortable pillow, and so on. 4. Approval to get psychological and have a great cry. Not only are HSPs additionally vulnerable to environmental stimulation, they're also sensitive emotionally. According to Dr. Elaine Aron, author of The Highly Sensitive Individual, sensitive people tend to weep more quickly than others. Sensitive people can't help but reveal what they're feeling, she told the Huffington Post. They show their anger, they show their joy. Valuing that is really crucial. 5. Time to adapt to change. Transitions can be rough for anybody, but for highly sensitive people, they can quickly grow out of control into a package of tension and overwhelm. Even positive changes, like beginning a new relationship or moving into a dream home, can be overstimulating and require an extra long period of modification. 6. Close, meaningful relationships. HSPs long for deep connections with others. Truth be told, according to Aron, they might get bored or restless in relationships that lack significant interaction. Yet, this does not mean they're prone to relationship hopping. Rather, they could actually work harder to strike up a significant conversation with their partner and produce intimacy. This also means HSPs have the tendency to be selective about the people they let into their lives. A surface-level, give-and-take relationship will just not suffice. An HSP wants to dive deep into your soul and get in touch with you in a profound way. Let them. 7. A mild, healthy way of handling dispute. Sensitive or not, fighting with a loved one is the worst, but sensitive people tend to feel extra restless when dispute arises. Usually, an internal battle takes place. The HSP may have strong emotions about something, but keep it to themselves, because they don't want to make the other person mad. Handling an angry person can be extremely overstimulating. Plus, we dislike hurting other people just because we know from personal experience just how much that sucks. HSPs tend to have high levels of empathy, and this is just one of the ways our caring for others appears. Sadly, this means sensitive people often hide their needs and just go along to get along. They really need a healthy way of dealing with difference that does not involve yelling or drama. 8. A pretty good night's sleep. A lack of sleep is definitely enough to make anyone irritable, sloppy, and ineffective. However, an absence of sleep for an HSP can make life practically intolerable. Getting enough sleep helps relieve HSP's ramped-up senses and permits them to process their feelings. How much sleep a delicate person gets can literally make or break their day. 9. Well-balanced meals, spaced regularly throughout the day. According to Aaron, hunger can really mess with a sensitive individual's mood or concentration. HSPs virtually define what it means to be hangry. 10. Caffeine-free and non-alcoholic alternatives. Surprise, surprise! Some HSPs, but not all, are more vulnerable to the effects of caffeine and alcohol. 11. An outlet for their creative side. Many of the highly sensitive people have a strong need to create. They carry their poignant observations, insights, and emotions into art, poetry, music, and more. Deborah Ward, author of Conquering Low Self-Confidence with Mindfulness, writes, "Sensitivity can be frustrating, but it is also like having extra RAM on my personal hard drive. Creativity is the pressure valve for all that accumulated emotional and sensory data." 12. A good sense of purpose. Some people seem to drift through life without direction or purpose. For HSPs, this is unthinkable. Rather, they think deeply about the big things in life. Who are they? Why are they here? And what were they put on this world to do? Whether it's creative writing, taking a trip in the world, or leading the way for a cause they believe in, sensitive people yearn for meaning. 13. Loved ones who comprehend and appreciate their sensitive nature. Because many people aren't highly sensitive, they just do not understand what it's like to get really stressed by, say, a surprising noise, a busy weekend, or a violent scene in a movie. Not everybody will get it, and that's okay. What an HSP needs is at least a few people who really understand their sensitivity, preferably the people closest to them. Somebody who not only gets it, but helps protect them from overstimulation. "Yeah, it is perfectly all right that we leave the party now. I can see all over your face that you are overstimulated." And someone who sees all of the fantastic gifts that come with this rare trait. 14. Natural environments and beauty. HSP or not, our environment impacts us. But for HSPs, the response is even more profound. For them, the way things look actually matters. Messy, chaotic, or just plain ugly environments might agitate them. Beauty is a balm that renews and soothes. Chapter 5. Relationship Issues. According to research by Elaine Aron, relationships are typically less happy for highly sensitive people. We are more aware of our environments and the people in it, so we are more likely to end up being unsettled by our partner's conduct and stress more about the possible repercussions. We also feel tension more and need more downtime, which can put a stress on the relationship. Regardless of these obstacles, many individuals are very attracted to the sensitivity of HSPs. They really love our empathy and our concern for their emotions. They love our desire for deep, significant relationships and our distaste for the superficial. For a person who has never ever met an extremely sensitive individual before, our credibility can feel like a breath of fresh air. We also have the tendency to be attracted to people who really need our help and who are attracted to our open, generous, caring, and empathetic personality. However, this attraction can be deceptive. All too often, People find it easier to make the most of our caring, giving nature than to help themselves, and we end up as personal therapists or doormats rather than equal partners. Many of the HSPs also have feelings of self-doubt or low self-esteem simply because their sensitivity isn't always accepted or valued. So, finding a romantic relationship in which our trait is wanted can drive us to be much more empathic, handy, and sensitive to others' emotions in an effort to gain acceptance and love. Aaron's research has actually revealed a characteristic in highly sensitive people called mate sensitivity, or the ability to quickly assess what pleases our partner. When we know what someone wants, we try to make them happy. But issues can show up when we give way too much. All too often, the more we give, the more other individuals take, and eventually we neglect our own needs and end up tired, resentful, and unhappy. In the meantime, we are unsure why we feel so unfinished when we have worked so hard and blame ourselves. Relationships can be challenging for a highly sensitive person. However, the difficulty is often that HSPs feel so good about helping others, we wind up putting their needs before our own. Rather than attempting harder to help our partners, we HSPs need to learn to help ourselves. Here's how. 1. Be familiar with yourself. Sort out what you really need first. If you do not know what your needs are, you will never get them met. Whether it's tons of downtime, peace and quiet, or one-on-one discussion, if it's important to you, it is essential to the relationship. HSPs are so concerned with being a great partner and friend, says psychologist Dr. Margaret Paul, we may not give ourselves what we need. 2. Accept yourself. When you accept and appreciate yourself as you are, others will learn to do the same. Don't put up with anybody who tries to tell you that you are too sensitive or that you need to change. Somebody who tells you that you should just unwind or that you are making a big deal out of absolutely nothing is not the right individual for you. And sensitive people are naturally meaningful, says Aaron. We cannot help but show our emotions, whether it's fear, anger, or joy. It is necessary that both you and your partner really appreciate and accept that. It can take a little bit of time for non-HSPs to comprehend what being an HSP is actually like. But a person who enjoys you will make the effort to understand and accept you for who you are. Being sensitive isn't a flaw that needs to be hidden or fixed. It is a gift to be supported and valued. The first individual to do that is you. 3. Set boundaries. HSPs need to develop strong and clear fences to safeguard their sensitivity. It's not selfish to say no or to tell people what you really need. It's just looking after yourself. In the book Safe People, authors Henry Cloud and John Townsend assert that a safe person will not be threatened by your need for intimacy, nearness, your fears or worries, your awareness of their feelings, or your need to comprehend them. They will strive to be the person who will assure you and appreciate your limits. 4. Take responsibility. It's up to you to get your needs met, and those needs may be rather different from your partner's. Lots of people think about themselves way too much, but HSPs typically think about others too much. The key to an effective relationship, says Dr. Paul, is taking responsibility for your own life. You should be giving as much love and kindness to yourself as you do to your partner. 5. Don't be a rescuer. It might feel wrong to stand back and watch someone struggle in life, but you are not responsible for anyone else's emotions. It's your job to take care of yourself so that you can be really yourself and satisfy your potential. People need to fall down, brush themselves off, and get up again. Otherwise, they will never learn how to walk by themselves. You can still offer empathy, but at times, you just need to step back. and let them figure it out for themselves. 6. Be careful of vampires. Some don't want to learn or help themselves. They want you to do it for them, and then they want more. Nonetheless, a drowning man will pull you down to save himself. You can still help people, but make sure you stay on sturdy ground and toss him a line so he can get himself out. If you're dating, consider not how beneficial you can be to someone, but how much they enable you to be yourself, to be relaxed and happy, safe and secure as you both grow, with somebody who will be there for you when you need them. 7. Don't prod. Do not keep trying to make your partner understand you, be there for you, or really love you when they do not. Whatever they might say in words, believe their behavior. Tell them what you need. Be there for them. Provide a chance to change. And if you're not feeling loved, valued, and respected, carry on. You'll find a person who meets those needs. 8. Stand up for yourself. HSPs dislike dispute, and we will often keep from it rather than face it, which means we put all our energy into soothing and pacifying our partner, instead of standing up for ourselves. Sensitive people can feel broken between speaking up for what they have faith in and staying silent for fear of a harsh reaction from others, says Aaron. However, argument does not need to be aggressive. You can say what you think calmly and clearly, and expect your partner to do the same. Take responsibility for your part in the dispute, and apologize if you're in the wrong. If things get heated, take a break and leave until everybody has cooled down. 9. Heal yourself. At times, we need to take a bit of time to heal ourselves from past experiences or hurt emotions before deciding to end a relationship, says Dr. Paul. Our own fears and insecurities typically add to our relationship problems. And it's within a relationship where we can learn how to grow, as long as our partner supports us and wants to recover and grow as well. 10. Love yourself. When you really love yourself, you give yourself the time, attention, patience, caring, respect, and love that you would give your own child. It does not mean that you're going to love anybody else less. It means that you don't need to depend upon anybody else to give you the love that you need and are worthy of. You can give it to yourself. This can feel very wrong to HSPs, who feel others feeling so strongly and want to help so urgently. But when you really love yourself, you're ensuring your own needs are getting met. And after that, you can give to others without sacrificing anything. You can give easily and often because you are constantly renewing your own store of love from the inside out. The key to good relationships for highly sensitive people is not to give more to others, but to give more to yourself. When both partners value themselves enough to ensure their own needs are met, when they communicate those needs to each other and have enough respect to accept one another as they are, a healthy, loving relationship can thrive for HSPs and non-HSPs alike. Chapter 6. How to Flourish as a Highly Sensitive Male. Men are supposed to be tough, aggressive, and active. They are discouraged from demonstrating emotions like fear or unhappiness, as though absolutely nothing should ever bother them, since that would make them appear weak. That negative stigma makes life even more difficult for men who are highly sensitive. Their natural disposition for empathy, compassion, art appreciation, and creative skill are rejected as womanly qualities and expected to be repressed, which can cause tension, depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. Research psychologist Dr. Elaine Aron says that approximately 20% of the population is highly sensitive, and the quality is equally separated between males and females. That means roughly 20% of all men are highly sensitive. In their book, Raising Cain, the authors demonstrate how the emotional lives of boys are reduced by both grown-ups and their peers as they are discouraged from developing qualities such as empathy, sensitivity, and heat. Men are at a high risk for suicide, alcohol and drug abuse, violence, and isolation. Suicide is the single largest killer of men under the age of 45, and in the U.S., men are 3.5 times more likely to die by suicide than women. Instead of seeking help, some guys try to self-medicate with drugs or alcohol. According to Ted Zeff, Ph.D., author of The Strong, Sensitive Young Boy, Help Your Child Grow into a Pleased, Positive Man. Though boys are taught to maintain emotional control, research studies that measured their heart rate or sweaty palms in mentally arousing situations showed that there's no distinction between boys' and girls' reactions. Boys have the exact same psychological needs as girls. All HSPs take in more info from the world around them than non-HSPs, which can lead them to feeling overwhelmed, emotional, and in need of solitude to recharge. And that includes highly sensitive men. It is important for highly sensitive men to find ways to express their emotions in a healthy way. But how do you do that? When you've been taught to hide your emotions and rough it out, just the thought of expressing emotion can make you feel like you're exposing yourself to mock, contempt, and embarrassment. Yet, embracing your sensitive side doesn't mean quitting your masculinity. As a highly sensitive man, you can be both sensitive and strong. Here's how. How to flourish as a highly sensitive man. Learning how to express yourself and accepting yourself as an extremely sensitive person takes practice. When you have spent your life believing that boys do not cry and showing compassion signifies weakness, it may feel strange letting your guard down. However, it will also be a relief. And you are going to be a much healthier and happier man who is able to love himself and give back to the people you love. 1. Self-acceptance. The primary step is to acknowledge that you are an extremely sensitive man. It is an important part of who you are. There are a lot of positive attributes shared by so many sensitive people, and that includes sensitivity to sensory info, instinct, and creative skill, which can help reinforce your relationships, prosper in work, and deeply enjoy artistic pursuits. Awareness can help you see changes in the environment, from a gas leakage to the tone of your kid's voice. Sensitivity is a strength, but not in the stereotyped aggressive way. Aaron defines HSPs as priestly consultants, who offer a necessary balance to the world's warrior kings. We are the thinkers, who stop briefly to check and consider things, who take time to reflect on what is going on below the surface area, and who advise with our insight and instinct. 2. Self-awareness. If you do not know how you feel, how can you reveal it? Comprehending who you are and what you're feeling is key to building your self-confidence as a highly sensitive individual. Ask yourself, how do I feel about this circumstance? What am I trying to communicate? Maybe you are unsure if you should be feeling that way, or you are not exactly sure how you can reveal those feelings in a positive way. Maybe you are wondering if you're going to be judged adversely, or will it come out the wrong way? As an HSP, your natural intuition and empathy will help you find answers to these questions. The key is to ask them and wait on the answer to appear, instead of brushing your feelings aside. With practice, you will get confidence in your capability to comprehend your feelings and express them in a proper way. 3. Sincerity. And when you are aware that you're feeling an emotion, ask yourself, where is this feeling originating from? Am I upset at this person, or am I in a bad state of mind because I was stuck in traffic? Am I feeling anxious simply because I am worried about the speech or what my family will think of me? Once you can be truthful about the real reasons for your emotions, you're going to be better able to manage your feelings and reveal your emotions. 4. Attention. Pay more attention to your body's physiological signals. Our minds and bodies are connected, so when you feel a strong emotion, like anger, worry, or anxiety, it often shows up in some physical form, like sweaty palms, a headache, or an upset stomach. You might notice you clench your teeth when you're stressed. For HSPs, that could mean a journey to the grocery store or a room full of kids. Again, ask yourself, am I angry? And what could be causing this? In most cases, you might just be overwhelmed by way too much sensory info, or distraught by taking in the emotions of others. If you are, take a break, find somewhere silent, and breathe. HSPs really need rest, downtime, and quiet time to recharge. You don't have to participate in everybody else's idea of fun. Do what's right for you, whether that's walking in the woods or just listening to music. 5. Creativity. Highly sensitive people are typically extremely creative, so try expressing your ideas and feelings through a masterpiece, like drawing, painting, writing, playing or writing music, or cooking. Creative pursuits help you to make use of your thoughts and feelings and express them in symbols, metaphors, and images. It is not the finished product that matters, but the liberty it gives you to express yourself in your own way. 6. Self-compassion. You should have love and respect as much as anybody else. If you are worried that people are going to think badly of you for being sensitive, demonstrating empathy, or expressing your creative side, remember that the only opinion that matters is yours. If anyone has told you that you need to suck it up, rough it out, and be a man, they lied to you. All you have to be is yourself, because the world needs you and your sensitivity. Most boys are raised to hide their emotions and keep from showing their emotional side, but that has only created men with a failure to comprehend themselves or communicate their emotions to the people they care about. For the highly sensitive man, self-awareness and self-acceptance are vital, because sensitivity is such a basic part of who you are. Repressing your true self can produce depression, anxiety, or drug abuse problems, in addition to low self-confidence and misery. Sensitivity in a man is not a characteristic to be buried, but embraced. Its benefits, like empathy, creativeness, instinct, and consciousness, can make you not only feel good about yourself, but end up being the kind of man you were meant to be. This has been Highly Sensitive People, Survival Guide for Introverts and Empaths. Written by Vaiana Ariz. Narrated by Samantha Novak. Copyright year 2020 by Vaiana Ariz. Production copyright by Vaiana Ariz. Highly Sensitive People. How sensitivity can benefit relationships, creativity, and depth of character. Written by Vaiana Ariz. Narrated by Samantha Novak. Chapter 1. Are you a highly sensitive person? Being insensitive is certainly an unwanted characteristic, but does that mean that the opposite, being sensitive, is a preferable one? Obviously, in our Western society, we cannot comprise our minds. We consider either being insensitive or being sensitive to be undesirable. Society requires that sensitive people develop a thick skin and that insensitive people be more thoughtful. But what does highly sensitive really mean? Is highly sensitive individual a scientific term? As it ends up, there is research on this inherent trait of high sensitivity. The clinical term is sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS. Highly sensitive people are born that way. It isn't something they learned. As kids, they may be described by instructors as shy or hindered, specifically in Western nations. As adults, they may be referred to as introverts. It is necessary to remember that not all sensitive people are shy or introverts. As a matter of fact, 30% of HSPs are thought to be extroverts. HSP scales for grown-ups and kids have been developed and used in research. A typically used scale includes 27 varied but strongly interrelated products. An HSP has a rich and complex inner life, is deeply moved by the arts and music, gets easily overwhelmed, has trouble carrying out a task when being observed, easily startles, is sensitive to pain, caffeine, and hunger, is attuned to inner bodily feelings, and readily notices sensory changes. Here is a case study of a young woman who would be classified as an HSP. Fatima likes to toss herself in the arms of nature. She experiences the blueness of the oceans like nobody else. As she walks, she feels a little like trees bend just a little to talk to her. Mountains provide her with a sense of achievement, like there is something out there much larger than human beings. When she enters a room, she's the first to see smells, subtle noises, and shocks quickly. When she watches television series, she immerses herself in each of the characters. It takes her days to recalibrate her sense of self after watching a motion picture or reading a book. She is a remarkable instructor, though when the principal observes her class, she gets overloaded and delivers her worst efficiency. The week before her menstrual cycle, she is extremely concentrated on her pelvic pain, and PMS triggers her to be irritable, have a foggy brain, and make poor choices. She is extremely diligent, wants to keep from making mistakes at all costs. She is guarded around people so that she doesn't say anything wrong, which would make her very anxious. In the meantime, she easily gets impacted by other people's moods and stories. Investigators connected this trait to positive qualities, but also to mental disorders. It is not unexpected that this trait is found in artists and poets and is linked to giftedness, creativity, and empathy. In the meantime, an HSP is at a greater risk of depression and other mental illnesses. They are also at a higher risk of burnout because they get quickly overwhelmed. This is exactly why it is critical to know if you're an HSP, so you can seek out relationships and environments that make you shine. The brain of an HSP is different. There are natural reasons for all of the components of this trait. An HSP's brain is wired in a different way, and the nervous system is highly sensitive with a lower limit for action. This hyperexcitability contributes to increased emotional reactivity, a lower threshold for sensory info that is bothered by noise or way too much light, and increased awareness of subtleties, such as fast-to-notice smells. There are also changes at the macrobrain level. The areas related to this quality significantly overlap with the brain parts that support empathy. Also, they have a hyperinsula, which clarifies their heightened awareness of their inner emotions and bodily sensations. This hyperactivity clarifies their sensitivity to pain, appetite, and caffeine. There is also some recent evidence that this trait is related to the notorious 5-HTLPR gene, the serotonin gene, linked in many psychological conditions like depression. How to make the most of your high sensitivity. Decrease the number of extreme stimuli in your environment. Limit the number of tasks when multitasking. Stay away from burnout by seeing early indications, like feeling overwhelmed and restless. Get your thoughts and deep emotions on paper so that they will not cloud your brain. Try mindfulness meditation, specifically to deal with high sensitivity to pain. This will teach you to acknowledge pain as the sum of feelings suspended from the label of pain. Take advantage of your creativeness. Draw, color, or write. Take advantage of your predisposition for higher empathy to enhance relationships, to end up being a much better colleague, and to assure your self-regard. Be comfortable in your sensitive skin. Own it, and never repent of it. Be truthful about your predisposition to be an HSP, especially in close relationships. However, don't forget to highlight the positive elements: more empathy, a deep thinker, able to see things from a much different perspective, appreciation of arts and music, and others' positive qualities. Chapter 2. What it means to be a highly sensitive person. How do you know if you have an extremely sensitive personality? The first port of call is the HSP scale test. It is also worth taking a closer look at the 4 indicators that sensitivity professionals like Elaine Aron use to specify high sensitivity. Am I highly sensitive? I react highly to criticism. I wish I had thicker skin. I have been really sensitive since I was a child. I get quickly stressed out and find noisy environments hard to deal with. These are just a few of the things I usually hear from the highly sensitive clients I have met over the past few years. Do any of these ideas ring a bell with you? Although these thoughts could arise from, for instance, short-range mental concerns, they could also be a sign that you're highly sensitive. Scientific psychologist and scientist Elaine Aron defines 4 signs that we can use to judge whether we're highly sensitive, which she refers to by using the acronym DOSE. 1. Depth of processing. 2. Overstimulation. 3. Psychological reactivity, including but not limited to empathy. 4. Sensitivity to subtle stimuli. According to Aron, to be highly sensitive, all 4 elements need to be present in an individual from childhood onward and can't be a direct repercussion of a mental health problem or the experience of trauma. While it is, of course, possible to all at once be highly sensitive and to be struggling with a psychological health problem. Let's look at what each of these terms mean. Depth of processing. Depth of processing is the crucial attribute of high sensitivity, from which the other 3 signs all stem. It's difficult to observe depth of processing externally, but it can be witnessed indirectly in people who think deeply about things and experience strong feelings in reaction to their environments and the experiences that they have. It is a high sensitivity, a special thing, when faced with both positive and negative sensations and subtleties in the world, and the deep way in which one deals with and processes what one has experienced. What this means on a practical level is that you could, for instance, be somebody who thinks a lot about spiritual and philosophical questions. You could find choices tough to make, and you could like to think analytically and laterally about problems. It might mean that you appreciate and look for depth, and that you are deeply compassionate concerning both people and animals. Every little thing that highly sensitive people experience, they process deeply, and each experience leaves traces in the form of thoughts, emotions, impressions, physical feelings, memories, and dreams. It's as if the mind and the body of an extremely sensitive person are a seismograph that has the ability to pick up subtle vibrations in the ground, reacting more quickly and responding far more highly. In certain cases, this can be enjoyable, just because it can be an enhancing experience that makes life important and varied. However, At times, it can be strenuous and demanding. When the things you experience are processed really deeply, then this is very true of all experiences that you have in life, whether they be negative or positive. Overstimulation. If you respond specifically sensitively to your environment and you deeply process the information and stimulation around you by observing, reflecting, feeling, and reacting, then this overstimulation can rapidly cause a feeling of overarousal. All people undoubtedly reach a high level of arousal if they experience a really high pitch of stimulation. Basically, our arousal level represents the level at which our nerve system is being triggered. When we react to external and internal stimuli and process them, our physiological stimulation boosts, which in turn influences our ideas and feelings. When this arousal level is too high, our well-being and our cognitive abilities begin to reduce, which can manifest itself in problems focusing, struggling to come up with ideas, and blanking. We also experience a high degree of physical and psychological tension, and at times even anxiety. Because of their very reactive and sensitive main nerve systems, highly sensitive people process information very deeply, and as such become over-aroused and overstimulated much more rapidly than people who are less vulnerable to their environment. Usually, highly sensitive people will specify overstimulation as just tension or irritation, and it is usually the biggest challenge that their high sensitivity postures, just because it is typically very hard to keep from in everyday life, be it work meetings, children's birthday parties, or perhaps a vibrantly lit, busy grocery store. Emotional reactivity, consisting of empathy. The third indicator of high sensitivity is a usually high emotionality, which isn't limited to certain circumstances or specific emotions. Again, this should have been present from childhood and relates to both positive and negative feelings, and isn't associated with extremely specific situations in which these feelings associate with an individual's negative life experience. Simply put, a tendency to react to things more emotionally than others do in similar situations, and to do so whether such things are enjoyable or unpleasant, and in whichever situation they take place. Also typical for highly sensitive people and linked to psychological reactivity is a high capacity for empathy, supported by findings that show that the area of the brain, including mirror neurons, is more activated in highly sensitive people. Those cells in our brains are activated when we witness something, exhibiting a pattern of activity that corresponds to the pattern that would have been triggered if the exact same thing had happened to us. Sensitivity to subtle stimuli. If, as a highly sensitive individual, you find specific materials undesirable, have a hard time sleeping in noisy environments, or quickly notice little changes in your environment, this doesn't, in fact, mean your sensory organs are better developed than other people's, but rather that you process the stimuli more deeply. This is a marker of high sensitivity. To put it simply, highly sensitive people don't hear or see better than other individuals, but what they do view is processed more deeply and resonates in them longer. Our sensitive, physiological perception of the world through our sensory organs can be associated with hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, and touching, and also to our perception of pain and temperature. It's really typical that highly sensitive people have a significant hostility to extremes of temperature, whether hot or cold, and that they usually find loud, full, or busy places quickly overstimulating, and that they are usually extremely vulnerable to smells and sounds. There are, of course, big differences among highly sensitive people in how these signs manifest themselves and how regularly they happen. Not each highly sensitive individual, for example, is sensitive to smells, and individual traits can manifest themselves to different degrees and be set off in a different way in different situations. Together with distinctions in our experiences and formative histories, how we're feeling on a given day, our mood, our age, and the framework of a given situation all play crucial roles in how we feel and react. However, all 4 of the DOE's signs do really need to be clearly recognizable and frequently manifest themselves as a propensity in our lives for us to be considered highly sensitive, even if they aren't all necessarily felt as being equally challenging or troublesome. Chapter 3: The Highly Sensitive Child. Sarah is a 7-year-old girl with an inquisitive mind and a clever sense of humor. She typically asks her family thought-provoking questions and uses huge words for her age. With her loved ones, Sarah is talkative and spirited, but when meeting new people, she tends to be cautious and can seem just as if being shy. Compared to her siblings, Sarah was a reactive baby. She sobbed quickly and was susceptible to being overstimulated. She had to be near to her mom at all times, didn't like being held by strangers, and experienced stronger separation anxiety than her siblings. Sarah has always been bothered by crowds and busy places, and stuns easily with sudden or loud sounds. She is susceptible to crises and has trouble sleeping at night if she does not have enough quiet time to rest each day. While Sarah enjoys hanging out with her friends, she typically calls her parents to pick her up early from birthday parties or sleepovers, as she finds group social circumstances overwhelming. Sarah's instructors specify her as highly perceptive. She notices subtleties in her physical and social environment that the other children do not seem to notice. A subtle change in her classmates' mood, the new earrings her teacher is wearing, the slight whistle of her good friend's nose when he breathes in. Sarah is also highly compassionate and notices when other people or animals are distressed or in pain. Sarah's characteristics are normal for an extremely sensitive child. Sensory processing sensitivity, a personality trait. It is estimated that around 30% of the population are highly sensitive. High sensitivity is considered to be inheritable and an evolutionarily calm character trait, provided equally in males and females, and observed in over 100 species of non-human animals, consisting of monkeys, dogs, fish, and pests. Highly sensitive people, contrasted with those who are less sensitive, have a higher capability for seeing subtleties in their environment, a deeper cognitive processing of physical, social, and psychological stimuli, greater emotional reactivity to positive and negative stimuli, and higher empathy, and are more quickly overstimulated. The scientific term for high sensitivity is sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS. Research shows that SPS is a continuous temperament trait, with people falling somewhere on the sensitivity continuum between low sensitivity and high sensitivity. Highly sensitive people have a tendency to be more familiar with info in their environment and process this information on a more complex level than the majority of people, which is actually believed to influence the way that they think, learn, plan, and experience the world. From an evolutionary perspective, an increased capability to perceive and process environmental stimuli is considered to be a benefit in certain circumstances when it increases a person's capacity to find and react to opportunities, that is, food, alliances, and risk, like predators and rivals, in the environment. We can compare the HSP to the canary in the coal mine, efficient in providing innovative caution of risk or chance before it is found by the bulk of the group. More impacted by the environment for better and for worse. Highly sensitive individuals across species have been found to be more susceptible to their environment. It is hypothesized that just because highly sensitive children process experiences more thoroughly, their development is more highly impacted by environmental impacts. Environments, in the framework of SPS, include not only physical environments, that is, food, caffeine, and medication, but also social environments, or in other words, family characteristics, other individuals' moods, and crowds. Sensory stimuli, meaning acoustic, olfactory, tactile, and visual, and internal experiences, or ideas, feelings, physical feelings such as hunger and pain. Although high SPS is considered to be a neurobiological difference and not a condition, research has shown that in demanding and unsupportive early environments, highly sensitive children could have poorer growth-related results and an increased possibility of experiencing behavioral disturbance and mental troubles, like anxiety and depression, in youth and later life. In contrast, in helpful and highly supporting early environments, the ones who are highly sensitive have the capability to flourish and might have better developing trajectories than less sensitive people, like improved emotional wellness and greater social competence. Thomas Boyce, MD, an author of The Orchid and the Dandelion, likens sensitive children to orchids, flowers that require extremely specific, helpful environments to grow. He says that these children show an exceptional capacity for prospering in nurturant, encouraging circumstances, but support disproportionate varieties of illnesses and problems when raised in demanding, unfavorable social conditions. In contrast, kids who show a biological indifference to experiences of hardship and flourish in almost all environments are likened to dandelions. Considered that highly sensitive kids are more affected by their environment, for better and for worse, it is of critical significance that caregivers, educators, and health professionals are actually aware of the quality and work together to develop the supportive and nurturing conditions these orchid children need to develop efficiently, experience health and well-being, and flourish. Chapter 4. On being or loving a highly sensitive person. Perhaps you grew up hearing, "Why are you so sensitive? Brighten up." Or you might have been told the much more aggravating, "Don't be so sensitive." You could have also been told, "Do not have such blue eyes." The reality is that nobody chooses to have a highly sensitive character, any more than we choose our eye color, height, or predisposition to an illness. To make matters worse, most of us are mingled to see sensitivity as a weakness. And to the degree that we come to actually believe it to be a weak point, we then have issues with self-confidence. Sensitive children hear a great deal of criticism from parents, teachers, coaches, and peers. Toughen up. Shake it off. Get over it. Of course, not all highly sensitives have all of the same attributes. Some of us are brought to tears of delight by a beautiful tune or the innocence of a newborn infant. Some, myself included, flinch and feel physical pain if confronted with the sight of a child or an animal being abused. Torture scenes in movies are intolerable for tons of us, although we are totally conscious that the events are fictional. This strong and unexplainable response to both violence and attractiveness is one of 13 challenges that only highly sensitive people really understand. Other common qualities include a dislike for loud sounds and crowded spots, high anxiety when under time pressure, and the hellish feeling that includes having to operate on very little sleep. Those may be demanding situations for lots of people, but they are more intensely exacerbating to highly sensitive individuals. The idea of an HSP is based on measurements of people's reactions to stimuli, also called their sensory processing sensitivity. This degree of responsiveness was at first measured by psychologist Elaine Aron and her spouse Arthur Aron during the 1990s. The team then developed a scale, the HSPS questionnaire, to help people identify and separate amongst kinds of sensitivity. Research has indicated that HSPs process even minor stimuli deeply due to natural distinctions in their central nervous systems. Since they feel deeply and think of emotional events more deeply, they also get overwhelmed more quickly. It is important to comprehend that sensitivity is a temperament, an element of character, like introversion or extroversion, which is actually believed to be natural instead of learned. It has been approximated that 15 to 20% of the population has a highly sensitive personality. It happens about similarly for women and men. Being an HSP is not considered to be a condition or a malfunction. Regrettably, in spite of being a significant portion of the population, HSPs are still not well comprehended, and their particular obstacles are seldom acknowledged. There have been some revealing studies which evidence that the higher sensitivity of HSPs is because of distinctions in neurotransmitters, or dopamine, as well as the higher activity in their systems of mirror neurons. The mirror nerve cell system has been studied by neuroscientists for over 20 years as a major part of how we learn motor skills by observing others perform that ability, like kicking a soccer ball. There have been conflicting conclusions about their significance in the development of autism, though, according to neuroscientist V.S. Ramachandran, mirror nerve cells are certainly the beginning point for things like empathy. High sensitivity also has been linked to a gene that is connected with an increased vividness of the psychological experience. To put it simply, there is a hereditary basis for the more extreme and vivid experiences of HSPs. That is evidenced by a big difference in activity in the part of the brain which is involved in processing feeling and sensory data, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, or VMPFC. For those of us who identify with the examples defined here, it can be tough to accept these feelings as a part of who we are. We live in a civilization that moves at a really fast pace and continuously pressures us to do more and take on more. Self-care, including rest and relaxation, isn't highly valued within our culture. It is helpful when we are able to question the societal standards that direct us to do more and be more efficient without regard for the cost to our psychological well-being. We also really need to learn how to value our sensitivity and see the potential strength inherent in it. Being highly sensitive typically includes being highly compassionate to those near us. The capability for empathic reactions is a quality that benefits our relationships. High sensitivity is also connected with high levels of creative skill and a more eager awareness of subtleties. Many HSPs are able to make connections between ideas and facts more intuitively than non-HSPs. That can boost our ability to synthesize information and to present it to others in novel ways. In terms of psychological experiences, the extreme joy that is felt by an HSP is at least as powerful as the distress due to overwhelm. For me personally, the positives outweigh the negatives. Having said that, that balance only followed years of pursuing the acceptance of myself as I am, so that I can make accommodations as needed. As with any other challenges in life, understanding and acceptance are critical to getting rid of the obstacles. Chapter 5. Signs of High Environmental Sensitivity. Are you highly sensitive to your surroundings? Is a person you know quickly impacted by physical or social atmosphere? High sensitivity to the environment can be defined as severe physical, psychological, and psychological reactions to one's external, ecological, and social stimuli. A friend of mine once told me how she was highly susceptible to bright light, loud sounds, crowded places, and even eye contact in social situations. Those challenges not only impacted her day-to-day activities, but negatively affected her love life with her romantic partner. Below are 10 signs of high ecological sensitivity, with referrals from my books. Are You Highly Sensitive? How to Gain Immunity, Peace, and Self-Mastery, and How to Communicate Efficiently with Highly Sensitive People. While many individuals may experience some of these signs from time to time, a highly sensitive individual will likely feel too frequently and feel too strong. Some people might be highly susceptible to just 1 or 2 stimuli, while others could be highly affected by more on the list. 1. Feels awkward when exposed to bright lights, loud sounds, or certain strong fragrances. 2. Shocks easily by abrupt sounds, quick traffic, or other undesirable surprises. 3. Feels uncomfortable in big public crowds, in a room full of people talking, or with too many things taking place simultaneously. 4. Typically feels awkward in group circumstances, especially with casual acquaintances or relative strangers. Feels uneasy in not being able to be oneself. 5. Usually feels upset when watching or reading negative news in the media. Dislikes shock home entertainment, meaning intensely creepy or violent programs. 6. Usually feels unhappy when following individuals' posts on social networks. 7. Often feels anger or bitterness about situations in life or in society, which seems unjustified, annoying, or simply irritating. 8. Regularly feels physical signs, or tension, headache, or tiredness when exposed to undesirable ecological stimuli. 9. Regularly feels psychological signs like pain, apprehension, nervousness, or avoidance when exposed to unpleasant ecological stimuli. 10. Feels uneasy in romantically intimate circumstances. Excessively worries about partner's approval. Unreasonably scared of being judged or turned down by a romantic partner. Again, while some highly sensitive individuals might be acutely affected by just a couple of the traits above, others might be overstimulated by more on the list. For most highly sensitive people, the key to handling oversensitivity is to make use of emotional resistance and sensory resistance techniques to wisely relax and alleviate overstimulation. For those that live or work with highly sensitive people, reliable communication abilities are a must to promote positive and constructive relationships. Chapter 6. Why do highly sensitive people dislike being busy and hurried? I've always despised hurrying. As a kid, my parents or caretakers and instructors were always telling me to hurry up or get moving. As an adult, I still tend to move slowly, whether it is doing the dishes or going out the door in the early morning for work. Often this makes me the good friend or coworker who shows up several minutes late. "You're extremely purposeful about what you do," my personal trainer recently told me, as I moved systematically through my weightlifting set. Like I need a little extra time to do things, I also hate having too many things to do. For me, weekends are best when there's a lot of time to cover myself up in a blanket on the couch and unwind. And I love coming home from work and having no night strategies. To me, a blank area on my calendar is not boring, it's happiness. Where there are a lot of tasks on my to-do list or a lot of commitments to attend, I end up being a ball of tension. No matter how much I tell myself that it will be okay, my body feels shaky and my mind races, sometimes even well after the busyness is over. And if someone is hovering over me as I try to collect what I really need to get out the door, or rushing me onward, it makes those emotions 100 times worse. I used to think there was something wrong with me just because I'm sluggish and prefer calm over lots of fun. Then I learned that I am an extremely sensitive individual, HSP, and everything made sense. Highly sensitive people process stimulus deeply, and because of this, they are more prone to stress and overwhelm. Time pressure is a type of stimulation, and HSPs are extra sensitive to stimulus of all kinds. No one likes feeling overly busy or rushed, but for HSPs, that feeling is magnified. Let's explore why, plus 5 strategies for HSPs to cope with time pressure. Why HSPs hate being busy and rushed. According to Dr. Elaine Aron, author of The Highly Sensitive Individual, it prevails for HSPs to have to cope with deadlines, time pressure, and busyness. So why is that? It pertains to our depth of processing. Our depth of processing affects us in a number of ways, from causing us to not notice time passing, to overthinking things, to being overstimulated when there is a lot going on. In a current article, Aron clarifies why it's not uncommon for HSPs to run late, despite the fact that we're typically quite conscientious and thoughtful of others. The sensitive individual's depth of processing might cause him or her to be thinking, perhaps planning or thinking of, and not noticing the time passing. In other words, entering a rich state of concentration. Our depth of processing may also make it harder for us to get out the door and get to appointments or set up events. For example, let's say you're an HSP who is leaving the home for a trip. As you are packing and getting ready, your depth of processing starts. You start thinking about all the possible circumstances that may happen on your vacation, and all the things that could fail. Wait, I really need my umbrella because it might drizzle, you think. Hang on, these shoes will not be comfortable for a lot of walking. I really need to change them. And on and on. And for HSPs, these little things make a huge difference. For instance, wearing a dress with a tight waistband or uncomfortable shoes can make all the distinction for me between a great day and a bad or unproductive one. It's no wonder that HSPs put a lot of energy into attempting to forecast or keep away from what others may call minor inconveniences. There's a benefit to the following. HSPs are normally those that have precisely what anybody might really need, from the Advil for an unexpected headache to treat at the airport. The downside, all that preparation requires time. It's a comparable story when we have a lot to do. Our depth of processing makes us think deeply about each task. And we'd usually rather plod along thoroughly and conscientiously, ensuring we don't make mistakes, than rush through something. And when you can't cross jobs off your order of business quick enough, the tension compounds. Finally, when we have a lot going on, whether it's a family party, a work event, or hanging out with good friends, we want to be prepared for those events, and we process them deeply as well. After an event, highly sensitive people tend to really need plenty of time to boil down and unwind. Again, processing every little thing that happened to us, so it gets stressful when we have back-to-back commitments and no downtime. For the HSP, the resist busyness is real undoubtedly. Is it any surprise that sensitive people suffer from frequent exhaustion and emotional burnout? How HSPs can manage time pressure. 1. Leave additional time. When you have to get somewhere, leave extra time. More time than you think you'll need. Outrageous amounts of additional time. That way, when your depth of processing kicks in, and you all of a sudden start thinking of getting additional tissues or changing your clothes, you will have the time you really need. 2. Make lists of what you really need. I have a master packing list that includes everything I really need when I travel. It's saved money on my laptop, so I don't have to recreate it whenever I go on a journey, You can do this for other things too, like a list for what you really need when you leave the home in the morning for work. This particularly helps if you are accountable for getting children out the door. 3. Remove extra stimulation. If possible, load your suitcase when others aren't around. Prepare yourself for the networking event with the bathroom door closed. Just find a quiet area to tackle your order of business. Doing things quietly and alone, whenever possible, eliminates some stimulation. 4. Give yourself approval to say no. It's okay to say no to gatherings or commitments when you're already strained. When you say no, you're saying yes to more energy for the important things that really matter and less tension. 5. Give yourself time warnings. If you run late because you struggle to pull yourself out of your existing task, keep an eye on the clock and give yourself time warnings, similar to how you'd provide for a child who needs to quit playing soon and pick up his or her toys. 20 minutes till I really need to prepare to leave. 10 minutes, etc. In a lot of ways, the busy, modern world works against the HSP's nature. While this can develop incredible problems for the sensitive person, it's nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed about. Aren't all of us trying to slow down and find a bit more peace? Society could learn some lessons from thoughtful and intentional HSPs. Chapter 7. What not to say to a highly sensitive person and why. Have you ever been slammed for being too sensitive? It turns out that about 20% of people are categorized as highly sensitive. Genes and/or certain youths give rise to this personality type. HSP scales for adults and children have been developed and used in research. The scale consists of 27 varied but highly interrelated items. An extremely sensitive person has a wealthy and complicated inner life, is deeply moved by the arts and music, gets easily overwhelmed, has difficulty carrying out a job when being observed, quickly stuns, is sensitive to pain, caffeine, and appetite, is attuned to inner bodily feelings, and readily notices sensory changes. If you are an HSP, you might have been implicated of being too analytical, of being too sensitive, of being too psychological, of not dealing with criticism well, of not dealing with stress well. If you care about an HSP individual in your life, here is what you really need to understand. Too analytical. Just because an HSP has an excitable nervous system and a sensory system with a low threshold, they're the first to see any changes in details. Another name for HSP is sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS. It suggests that they have a low limit to sensory stimuli around them. That can add to a distinct capability of rapidly spotting changes in details. Because they may process more sensory info about their surroundings, they might come across as too analytical. The result of these sensory calculations could be a new perspective. Too sensitive or too emotional. Because of their rich and complex inner life, they're sensitive to any feedback. When giving feedback to an HSP, you should keep this in mind so you don't accidentally hurt them. Avoid using remarks that can have double entendre or neutral, dull feedback. Dealing with criticism. An HSP is really sensitive to negative feedback and takes longer time to recuperate after criticism. While many people do not like criticism, an HSP can be immobilized by negative remarks. Those kinds of comments can help with a predisposition to depression or anxiety disorders. Managing stress. Any event affects an HSP deeply. Their minds marinate in their surroundings. This means that they can easily get overwhelmed. When difficult events happen to a non-HSP, their system returns back to standard after the tension reaction resumes. However, an HSP can take a much longer time to go back to baseline after a difficult stimulus. Also, an HSP may view some benign stimuli as difficult, which causes overtaxing the nervous system and giving a feeling of being overwhelmed. When burdened with several stressors, an HSP can burn out and give up. The sensitivity of an HSP can bring a beautiful fountain of feelings, unequaled levels of empathy, and deep level of understanding to a relationship. It is definitely worth it to consider the above when dealing with an HSP you care about. Chapter 8. Advantages of being highly sensitive for love relationships. Sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS, is a genetically based trait found in around 20% of humans and over 100 other species. Highly sensitive individuals, or HSPs, are more affected by their environment and others. Well, this can be a mixed blessing when it comes to close relationships. Although it can be challenging to be a highly sensitive individual, in love or in love with an HSP. Undoubtedly, lots of times throughout my life, I have been called too sensitive by friends and romantic partners. Thank goodness there are some advantages. HSPs can literally feel what others are feeling. We see this in brain scans. When they're shown happy or sad face images of their partner, they show more activation in parts, such as the insula, that are associated with internal visceral sensations. They also show more activation in areas of the mirror neuron system, which respond in the exact same way when an action is performed or when it is perceived. HSPs may also be more empathic to other people's needs. One research study that I carried out in partnership with my coworkers revealed greater response in brain regions associated with empathy, awareness, and sensory integration in response to a partner's miserable facial screens. In the brain, this is shown by greater activation of brain circuits involved in attention, memory, and sensory integration. So HSPs process info more deeply and show more activation in memory areas of the brain from mentally arousing stimuli. So when a loved one and even a stranger displays some sort of feeling, if you are an HSP, you are a lot more likely to pick up on it. That can mean that you feel more anxiety or sadness or anger when those around you are feeling this way. Why in the world would we have progressed and continue to hand down this quality seen in about 20% of our species? Well, we really need people to care, to build communities and a world that will prosper. Aside from that, having greater empathy supports cooperation, which, without a doubt, has supported the development of our species. However, this can also be a great blessing because HSPs also show a lot of benefit activity when they see others' happy faces or perhaps happy pictures, like birthday cakes. At the very least, 2 neuroimaging research studies and some behavioral research studies, to date, have shown that high SPS people experience more powerful positive emotion and arousal or benefit response in the brain when seeing positive images. In the 2 brain imaging research studies, subjects were shown either happy faces or happy neutral images, like birthday cakes. With both paradigms, greater SPS was associated with stronger neural responsivity in crucial reward parts such as the VTA, that is high in dopamine receptors, connected with wanting, inspiration, and working for benefits. These qualities definitely support positive support in relationships, because if into it that our loved ones are miserable and in need of TLC, we may pay additional special care to take care of their needs, or support them in their life strivings. If you are in a relationship with an HSP, they're far more likely to get you. Be sensitive to your needs and think deeply and complexly about you as a person. Indeed, HSPs consistently show greater activation in brain areas related to elaborative and meaning-making processes and presuming others' goals and intentions. They also show greater activation in areas associated with memory, so they're a lot more likely to recall a story that you have shared with them, like what your favorite color is, or whether you like ice cream or not. That naturally can be a blended blessing because if you have had some sort of transgression in your relationship, they are more likely to recall that too. The other good news is that HSPs also show greater responsiveness to positive interventions. In a research study with girls given a behavioral interference for depression, HSPs, compared to low HSPs, showed greater positive responsiveness, decreased depression to the intervention. Because of this, if you happen to be with an HSP and you have experienced a minor relationship transgression, or just for the sake of fun, doing something positive for your relationship can go a long way. This has been Highly Sensitive People: How Sensitivity Can Benefit Relationships, Creativity, and Depth of Character. Written by Vaiana Ariz. Narrated by Samantha Novak. Copyright year 2020 by Vaiana Ariz. Production copyright by Vaiana Ariz.